Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be talking about DeepSeek and the effects that it's having around AI and honestly, reasoning models in general. If you have any questions, please go ahead and scan this QR code. It's going to pop up here in the top right corner. That'll give you the ability, top left corner, actually, that allows you to submit questions now. We did get a wonderful bunch of questions as part of the registration. So thank you for putting those in. And we'll get to those after I speak with two of our folks here at Expedient who have a lot of experience and understanding around DeepSeek and the AI models. And I got a chance to sit down with our manager of innovation and platform development, Mike Garuccio, to talk through what DeepSeek is doing. So let's go to that now. Is Mike Garuccio, who's one of our principal technologists, looking into AI. And Mike, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing great. We've heard a lot over the last few months about this thing called DeepSeek. There's a ton of buzz around it, but what is it? Like, what is DeepSeek? Why is everybody talking about this all of a sudden?
So DeepSeek is a Chinese company that recently released two new large language models. So what they call DeepSeek V3 and DeepSeek R1. V3 is a traditional language model, kind of comparable to GPT like 4.0. And then R1 is their what they're called reasoning model, which we'll cover what that is in a little bit. And that's kind of comparable to GPT's or OpenAI's GPT o1. And the real reason that they got so much attention was basically three different factors that made them unique and new, or at least appear that way. The first one was they basically landed on the top of all the common AI benchmarks out there. So at least on paper, they had the best models in the world, and they were open weight, so other people other than them could run them. They also had a very low claimed training cost, which sort of threw the stock market into a little bit of turmoil for a few days because it called into question a lot of the investment being made in GPUs. A lot of really both of those things have been pulled back. There's a lot of questions about whether that benchmark result is due to overtraining or overfitting to the benchmarks, as well as whether those training costs are real or if there's things we're not being told going on there. So a lot of that initial worry has been pulled back. But what you're left with is really a model that has very, very low inference costs if you let DeepSeek host it for you. And then lower than a few competitors' inference costs if you do have someone else other than DeepSeek host it for you.
So I think a lot of the buzz that we also get around DeepSeek is around the fact that it's coming from a Chinese company. And there's always an inherent concern when China is brought into the equation because most American companies don't want to send data to China. So, how are organizations able to take advantage of what DeepSeek is doing, but kind of avoid those concerns around the data security? And you kind of mentioned it a little bit around being able to run that model elsewhere, but how does that work?
Yeah, so really there's two different components here. So there's the model, the DeepSeek release that anyone can go download, and if you have enough GPUs available to you, can run. And then there's DeepSeek as a service that DeepSeek, the company, is hosting. So that service is really the thing that would give you problems in terms of compliance and data security because regardless of where they're actually hosting it, that model or that service is run by a Chinese company, and you have all of the inherent potential data security problems that are wrapped around that, especially since the last I checked, their terms of use does not include a we won't train on your data or we won't use your data clause, like most of the providers in the West do or will offer you. But there are a number of providers out there that have gone ahead, downloaded that model, and will host it for you and give you access to it. The model itself, there aren't any real concerns with as far as data security goes. There's not going to be some thing happening inside of there that's going to cause your data to leak. Um, and so that is a good option if you really do want to run DeepSeek. It can be tricky to find a provider that will meet your compliance needs, but that's obviously something that Expedient can help out with and try and make that available to you without that headache. Um, the other option is since the release of DeepSeek, and this is a few months on now, most of the other providers have released comparable models that will give you a similar level of performance at a similar price point without any of those concerns because they're from the well-known vendors in the space. So that's Google with their Gemini 2.0 thinking, Claude with 3.7 thinking, and then uh, OpenAI with Both O3 Mini and then GPT 4.5, although that one is much more expensive, it really does kind of set the new bar for a capability of a model.
And we've mentioned a few of these reasoning models now. What are those? I think this is something that a lot of people kind of go, "Oh, it's the reason it's the new model," but it's not the same thing as a I guess we could call it traditional LLM. It feels weird to say. But when we start talking about this, reasoning model, you have the O3 models, you have Claude's 3.7 thinking, all of these different reasoning models. What is a reasoning model? What makes them different?
So it's at some point the industry realized that you can get a model to perform better if you imprompt it and then train it on effectively talking to itself and talking its way through a problem instead of immediately just trying to give you an answer. So effectively, a thinking or reasoning model talks to itself or has an internal monologue of what it's actually talking through, and then uses that to give a better response. The advantage of that is it is able to do some things that a normal model just can't, especially when you start talking about multiple steps in a process. It's able to work through those much, much better. So you'll see that a lot in like coding assistants and a few other places. It's really working well at more complex tasks. So go research something along those lines. The downside is it's a lot slower because it's doing a whole bunch of internal text generation that you're never seeing or that you don't really care about to arrive at an answer for you. And then as part of that, it's also much, much more expensive. Depending on the provider, tokens are either the same price or more expensive than their normal models, but you're just generating a lot more tokens. So it's going to run your bill up much, much quicker. And so the reasoning models can do a lot of great things, but they really aren't great chat models, and they don't want to be the thing that you're defaulting to in chat.
And I think that's disheartening for me as somebody who talks to myself a lot when I'm trying to figure things out to know that the computers are doing that too. But I think this is where some of these use cases have really come up around reasoning models. Does it replace the standard sort of use case that most people have of, can you help me summarize this thing? Or can you give me 5 questions for something or generate me some bullet points? Does it replace those? Or is this really more for those complex coding type of tasks?
This really is more for those complex tasks. I don't want to kind of pigeonhole it into coding. It is also has a potential in building tools for doing research or much deeper writing where it's sort of expecting to be interactive with you and have a much bigger context and kind of longer length of time that it's writing across. So it's great for specific tasks, but it's just a thing that you want to be intentional about using as opposed to, oh, it's the best thing, I want to default to it. Um, you probably want a normal chat model for at this point like 80% of things, uh, with that reasoning model being available when you do need it for specific tasks.
Mike, this is all really, really helpful information. I want to thank you for your time, and we will be back after these brief messages. Everyone is interested in going into an AI world. Everybody wants to move into this space. But the biggest problem is, how do I do that in a secure manner? How do I protect my company's data?
It's kind of like the table stakes of AI. If you're going to start building applications with AI, you need to make sure that the right people are having access to the right AI models and the right data.
We've built our systems to integrate with the systems that you currently have in place for access and controls all throughout your organization.
Our AI security and compliance tooling allows you to connect into your existing Active Directory, your Okta One Login, Azure AD, your single sign-on platforms to be able to utilize your existing user directory and not have to manage a bunch of different accounts across different platforms.
We integrate with the systems you use today so that implementation is easy and security is guaranteed.
Welcome back. And with me today is Tom Cooper, our product owner for AI. Tom, how are you doing today?
Great. How about yourself, AJ?
I'm doing great. And we just heard from Mike about DeepSeek and a lot of the challenges and changes that are coming there. And it kind of got me thinking about the improvements to models that we've seen, right? We saw Claude go from 3.5 to 3.7. We've seen GPT and OpenAI go from GPT-4 to GPT-4.5. If you're an organization and you want to take advantage of these changes, like how do you even do that? Or where does that even fit into your overall AI strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of the reasons that we built the platform that we built, right? So the idea is as these models come out, traditionally, if you've picked one vendor, let's say Copilot, right? Copilot is built into a single model. Currently, that's GPT-4, but you're not going to see 4.5 in Copilot for a long period of time. And that period of time is all time where you can see efficiencies immediately from upgrading to the newer model. Our developers immediately, the day they announced Claude 3.7, they all wanted access to it. You are one of the ones who reached out to me right away when Gemini came out and said, Tom,
Mhm.
Gemini 2 now, right? So providing people a platform where they can start consuming these, they're already eager to jump forward because the news is keeping them in the cycle, and we just provide them the mechanism to do that.
And I think this is where our platform comes into play because being able to take advantage of multiple models isn't something you can do with every platform, right? We offer the ability to connect to Gemini and Claude and GPT and other models. So, how does that play into our overall capabilities and how does that play into somebody's overall AI strategy?
Yeah. So initially, the direction we would take from the very top is vendor lock-in is a problem everybody suffers from if they're trying to pick a model, right? And it's been referenced to me as paralysis by FOMO. Like I'm so fearful at missing what comes out maybe next month. DeepSeek was a really good is a really good example. When DeepSeek came out, the entire industry said, whoa, 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 do we have to change? Do we have to move off of OpenAI? When you're stuck into a contract with an individual provider, that's just not something you have the ability to do without waiting for your contract to expire or finding a way to maybe implement additional costs to bring them in. Our platform was designed to eliminate vendor lock-in from the beginning. Like any model that can meet our kind of level of privacy and security concerns, which should be the level that an enterprise needs to use a model, the moment they meet that, the moment we know they're not training on data, we keep all of those models up to date immediately. So companies actually don't have to worry about it. Their users can just start using them.
And you kind of touched on that a little bit. I think this is where the real operational challenges of AI are starting to hit some organizations where they want to take advantage of these things, but there's a compliance angle to it. There's a security angle to it. So how are we ensuring model compliance? Because like DeepSeek is, a Chinese-based model. So there's a lot of organizations that are like, I don't want to send my data to China. So how are we ensuring model compliance even outside of that specific example?
Yeah, so I mean, if we want to go into the details, what we've done, what our compliance team has helped us do. So we couldn't have done this without our compliance team, which is a world-class compliance team, without their ability to kind of guide us. First, we make sure that all of our vendors we work with are SOC 2 compliant. While that's standard, making sure that there's no broken bridge letters, remediations that aren't taken care of, all of those things that make a SOC report solid, our compliance team monitors those. But then also, do they have public attestations and private attestations in the terms of service that are contractual that help us pin them down to not training on data and not storing data? And the problem with something like DeepSeek AI, if you're talking about their models from overseas, right? From China, their SOC 2 compliance is a different set of compliance standards that we have. So we would never bring that in and make it available to a customer. But if a United States based company who has the same compliance mechanism, let's talk about, Azure Foundry for a second, right? They can bring up DeepSeek. If a company really wants to be able to implement that in a secure and safe way, we can open that door for them. We can't remove the biases that might be in the training data, but we could definitely provide that in a secure mechanism for them. I would suggest stay on Claude 3.7. It's magical.
And this is where I think that ability to pick the model you want to use. You just mentioned Claude 3.7 being your personal favorite.
Yep.
Some people really like GPT-4. Some people really like the Llama models. Some people want to be able to use something like DeepSeek. How is this beneficial for developers? Because I know that there's always the story of, you can go in and put in whatever prompt you want to and pick your prompts and those sorts of things. But if you're a developer trying to add AI into your software, into your workflows, how does this and how does our gateway help with allowing those developers to take advantage of those models as they're available?
Well, first off, from the beginning, the idea of the gateway was designing it so our own developers could consume it. So we, rather than just following a specific specification, we started with the most used specification, which is the OpenAI SDK. And then we wrote the entire translation layer underneath so that any developer that's using us can take either code they've written to OpenAI before, change the endpoint and change the key. Boom, it works with us. But if they want to take that same code and now make it work with Anthropic, they just got to change the model to a Claude model. They don't have to change any other parts of their code. So from the ground up, this was designed to make it easier for developers to build kind of internal tools. And anything that a user sees inside of our chat client, know that they could build the exact same functionality because our whole chat client is built on our API.
So when we start talking about all of these different models, what is the benefit of having multiple models available to you? Because I think that's something that we're not necessarily at a point where things have settled down. The industry is still innovating and new models are coming out. How are we, how do multiple models benefit an organization?
So this is a very interesting question. As we're moving forward through the development of LLMs, remember, enterprise use of these started in 2022, right? These are really, really new. As I look at, let's say, we talked about Claude a lot already, right? Claude is the most developer centric model. It's been post trained, which means they finished their model and then they trained it even further on how to develop and how to handle kind of writing unit tests and how developers work. If you've picked a single model, you chose Copilot or you're with OpenAI, and you're providing, let's say, your developers with only those tools, well, you're really asking your developers to write code with something that could be, 40, 50% less efficient and less effective at writing code. If you're asking me to take a large amount of data, and when I say a large amount of data, let's say you have 3 or 4 books worth of case files, and you want to feed that to the LLM to get some information back. You can't do that unless you have one that has a large context window, which would be Gemini, right? And as each of these kind of use cases unfold, 90% of employees are going to use the default. ChatGPT, answer my question. It's great. That works really good for me. But when somebody gets to a point where they need a model, giving them access to that model without having to worry about the security concerns, without having to put them through your own internal validation process, without worrying about whether or not that what their auditing is and whether or not you have the audit, like all of those things play a huge part in being able to say, do what you do with AI the best that you can. We'll give you the tools. And that's just what we're helping customers say to their employees.
And I think that plays into I give access to all of these models with all of the observability and security tooling around it, knowing that those individual models are compliant. And I, as a developer, get to pick which one is the best for me and not have to worry about, okay, well, we're locked in with this one particular model. We have to deal with this one. Even though I know this one over here is better, I'm stuck with this one. You can now take advantage of those things.
Yep.
And I think that's really, really powerful. Tom, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're
Well,
super busy, and we will see you all in the Q&A.
I guess.
Welcome back, everyone. And joining me now, live from beautiful, sunny Cleveland, Ohio, is Mike Ruccio and Tom Cooper. They're in the same room. I wasn't expecting that. I was honestly expecting both of them. They said, "Hey, we're in the same room" before we got on. So it was very nice. It's good to see you guys.
Thank you.
We got some really great Q&A from the pre-registration form. If anybody does have a question, again, up here, submit a question, scan the QR code, and you can ask your question live as well. The first question was, and I think, Mike, you kind of touched on this, was, can I reasonably run DeepSeek on my typical server infrastructure without the GPUs or specialized components? And you mentioned, yeah, you kind of need some GPUs to run it.
Yeah, you for the most part do. I will modify that a little bit, that there are very small versions of the DeepSeek model, like there are of Llama and many other things that you can run on like a MacBook. It takes a little bit of work. You still want something with the GPU, typically, but you can get it to run moderately well. Those are pretty limited in functionality, though.
Yeah, and I think that's the part here, is that the GPUs are what make this really scale and actually perform well. You can run a lot of models without it, but it's not going to be as nice.
Yeah.
The next question, I think this is our sort of main story here, is having extensive background working with PII data. I'm curious to know the best means for incorporating AI functionality while ensuring data security. Are there ways to use AI to protect intellectual property and stay HIPAA compliant? And I know that this is, Tom, this is something that you and the team have worked on specifically. Can you kind of walk through what that means from a data security and how connecting models into the data is done in a secure fashion?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, like we talked a little earlier, making sure that privacy is out front and the data is not being trained on is imperative. But really, when it comes down to HIPAA compliance, understanding your AI governance policy and how people are adhering to that policy, the best tool that we provide is our enterprise observability. It's just the ability to go in and enforce with your user base whatever governing policies you have, whatever regulatory bodies you're responsible for adhering to. Not only do we provide the ability to connect to those data sources and pull that data in, but we give you the ability as an organization to go in and make sure that your employees are adhering to those policies.
This is the biggest challenge that a lot of organizations are facing right now. You want to take on AI capabilities, you want to take on the AI models, you want to connect it to your data, but that data is very important. There's usually personally identifiable information, whether that's HR data or customer data, somewhere along the line, there's identifiable information. So being able to do that, and what we've built in order to do that is actually really impressive. And this is a deep kudos to the entire AI team that we have here, who've done a fantastic job and who will listen to me say, "I want Gemini 2 now." So thank you guys. The next one is an interesting one because we're in the infrastructure space, we don't see a lot in the CX, the customer experience space, but this is where we've seen a lot of things pop up around AI and use cases there because of the nature of that space. So how can AI help in those CX use cases where customers have multiple files of data and they want to be able to use RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, to access that data?
Yeah, so there's kind of two pieces there. And the first piece, and the one that's most obviously AI, is looking at 8-10 documents and providing a summary of what's in them. And that's something that just about any of the modern models can do, as long as they have a big enough context window. The other half of that, though, is going and finding those 8 or 10 documents that are actually relevant to the thing that you're asking about and getting those back to the model. And that's really where having your data in a searchable format, so a vector store that's also able to do things like query-based searches for titles, things from specific dates, that sort of thing, really comes into play, because it gives the model the ability to look up that information and pull it back for you, so that you don't have to go find it before you ask it to summarize. You can just say, "Hey, summarize this," and it can go look up the data for you.
And integrating API access to a workflow tool dramatically increases that effectiveness too, right? Internally, we use Retool, but we have access to all the vectorized data through the API. We have the ability to pull kind of semantic search from multiple different repositories and tie each of those steps into different steps of analysis, summarization. It really becomes powerful when you tie not just RAG and chat, but you tie RAG, chat, and now external tooling through, what is an API that wraps basically every single model we have and every data source. It's incredibly useful.
And this is, I think, where it's starting to meet the road. And the question here is very good, because it's actually getting to the base question that I always ask when someone is saying, like, how do I bring AI into my environment? I always ask, why? What is the thing you're trying to solve? What is the use case you're trying to hit? Because otherwise, it's just generic tooling. It's not really doing anything of note. When you have a specific use case you're trying to solve for, that's where you actually get value. That's where you could say, okay, needs to be compliant. This is why I need to connect it to my internal data, versus just here's Copilot or here's ChatGPT. We can go to the next question, and this one I'll kind of take a good start at here. As data center operators, what changes are you seeing in power, cooling, space requirements with the rise of reasoning models and high density AI workloads? A few weeks ago, I was actually at a data center summit that was more or less, AI is causing a lot of power needs, and we need to build more data centers in order to do this. It's a very, very interesting topic to go through, because right now we're kind of struggling with data center power already. Northern Virginia is running out of space. Central Ohio is running out of power in space there as well over the next few years, and AI is not going to make that any better. What most people will see in their data center is somewhere between 8 and 10 kilowatts per rack. This is a fairly common amount of power being driven to a rack for virtualized workloads or server workloads, storage arrays, those sorts of things. But when you bring in a AI platform, we have seen 50 kilowatts per rack, 100 kilowatts per rack. And while that requires a ton of power to be driven to the rack, that also means you have to cool all of that. And a lot of data centers need to have changes to their cooling. Like forced air doesn't work anymore. At that power draw, forced air is not enough. So being able to have things like liquid cooling and those sorts of things are things that you actually have to bring in, and that is a big investment for a lot of data centers. That's why you're seeing these effectively new data centers being built with this specifically in mind to take advantage of that. And Tom or Mike, I don't know if you guys have seen or heard anything in your conversations around data center usage for AI.
So I largely haven't. I think a majority of our customers are really going and consuming public models and consuming things that are sort of offered as a service from elsewhere. We don't really have a base of customers that are looking to do that high density, really GPU driven workloads. It's a thing that we can support, but it's not a thing that we really target. And so a lot of that ends up happening at other facilities. Certainly do, keep an eye on the new designs coming out from NVIDIA and see, these 100 kilowatt racks coming through that I don't envy the people that need to figure out how to support.
Yeah, this was actually, I think, one of the big things that people got excited about with DeepSeek was if you could actually run and train AI models and use a fraction of the power and the cooling, that means that, yes, that has an implication to NVIDIA's stock and other companies who are in that space, but also has an implication to where you can run these workloads. And we've also seen a number of questions around AI at the edge for things like inference and machine learning there too. So being able to have GPUs in remote locations can be interesting. It's just going to be it needs to be targeted to specific use cases and not, I want to just run the biggest models possible. And I think that's kind of where this comes back to.
Yeah, I agree there. And I also would say that there's a difference between traditional server infrastructure and small GPUs. I think there's a lot of potential in small-ish models running on like NVIDIA L4 GPUs at the edge or in the data center, outside of the really large models. They can kind of serve a different purpose.
All right, let's bring in the next question here. So how and when will AI have an effect on the daily tasks of my average users? I do want to thank someone for asking this question, because I think this is very interesting, because the answer is probably it is, and you don't know it yet.
So this question's asked on almost every sales call. It's probably asked again twice in every onboarding call, right? So I'll give you the fun answer, and then we'll give you the real answer, right? The fun answer is if you just give Gen AI to people today who use digital communication, the average is 5 hours to 10 hours a week. People are spending drafting emails. Drafting. This is not reading emails. This is not the three of our inboxes, deleting emails or sorting them. This is writing emails. And if you spend 5 to 10 hours a week writing email, and that alone, you gain 50%, 80% efficiency on, well, you're talking about, releasing anywhere from 3 to 8 hours of 40 hours every week back to somebody's calendar. I think there's efficiency gained right there. I don't think you need to look any further to understand how big of an impact that can have on an organization. If you add accuracy, you accelerate the rate that you can run it, you add efficiency, and then you even add a tinge of professionalism and almost kind of brand control that you can't get any other way. So I think those exist immediately. But the moment you attach RAG to it, right? So attach your own internal documents. Before we even talk about workflow changes, those are all big. We can talk about what those look like for hours, things that change your business. If I can just help people find information about their benefits quicker, find their training guides quicker, find their sales material before a call quicker. Every one of these things are incredibly easy um, to obtain with our system, and they're so low hanging fruit that it's almost impossible to not do them. And in doing that, you drive an amount of efficiency on both sides of the ball that's almost incalculable right now. We legitimately tell people you're ROI positive before you come out of the 3 month free trial that you saw there. There's no other tool and technology that can do that. That's how effective AI is. And it's day one. The moment you give somebody log into the chat, my estimation, if you tell them start writing your emails with this, you immediately are almost ROI positive right there.
Yeah, I think the one that I see a lot, or the use case I usually point to a lot is HR onboarding or even just HR general questions, because everybody has there's like four pieces of information you actually need. And you don't even need to get into actual PII data of I'm AJ and this is my address, social security number, and all that stuff. It's you have an employee handbook, a holiday schedule, a payday schedule, and a benefits, probably a PDF that says, here's all the health insurance plans that our company offers. And you can answer probably 80% of the questions that most people have, because nobody wants to read the documentation. They'll chat with it all day long, though. And so this is where, when you add RAG sources with your company's, maybe that's internal documentation, procedures, whatever, and it can ask questions and link back to the original document, that's massive, because it's getting people to the answers they want faster without having to put like super secret identifiable information at risk.
I can ask, tell me about our PPO plans to our chat faster than I can open up Outlook and find the right person to put in the email box. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. The efficiency that it drives for me is incredible. But then when you think about the efficiency of the HR department, our own internal HR department, we could see the excitement and the clapping when we told them we were coming out live with this.
Yeah. Hi, Molly.
Exactly.
They were thrilled because they got to see it. We put it in place for them. And it was really, here's a SharePoint folder with these 4 documents in it.
Yep.
And they immediately got to see like, oh, you could just ask those questions and it just answered. Oh, this is great. Thank you. Yes, please roll this out right now.
Yep.
And it didn't really put anything super critical at risk, and it actually saved them a ton of time.
Yep.
Let's go to the next question here. What compliance controls need to be looked at before onboarding an AI tool? How do you protect from data loss of intellectual property? And we kind of talked about this earlier in terms of, our security and compliance team and what they're doing. But Tom, or maybe Mike, walk through what they're really looking for, or when we see a new model, what are you looking for to bring to our compliance team to validate and make sure that everything's good? And when we add a model, we're not putting things at risk.
Yeah, so the number one thing that we're looking for is a up-to-date and valid SOC 2 report that we can then give to our compliance teams and have them go through line by line and really validate that everything there is up to the standards that you'd expect. We've had some surprises with vendors that are fairly widely used that once we actually started doing some scrutiny on their SOC 2s aren't really valid, missing bridge letters, other things like that. So it's important to actually dive in and have your compliance expert go through line by line of their report and make sure that there's not a, hey, we just decided not to do this in there, because you'll find a few of those sometimes.
And I think that's kind of where this comes back to, like, almost the rubber meeting the road of, yeah, all this AI stuff is really, really cool, but nothing about what we do in IT and from a compliance and security standpoint has really changed, right? So we don't have an ability to just ignore that. We have to continue doing this. And so going through compliance regimes like this, while incredibly not interesting, I have a master's degree in it too, and I'm telling you, it's not that interesting. It is something that we have to do for the various compliance and legal things, because if you don't and you leak data, you're liable for legal action, and that becomes its own a larger problem there.
And on this same note, when you look at just SaaS in general, the modern version of data protection in SaaS, it is the DPA, right? The data privacy or data protection attestations, We take that same level where we're looking, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the questions. We take that SOC 2 report, and with that being table stakes, if then we add into it that not only does a vendor have a DPA that lays out that they will not train or store data without um, without express written consent. So you get some understanding from the public side that they have pressure. That also is referenced in all of their terms of service when we engage with them to make sure that they're contractually held to that. So you start with SOC 2 compliance, and then you layer on top of that the attestations for data protection and data privacy that they won't train on that data. And you really do end up with a solid set of guardrails to be able to trust pushing your data through one of these public models.
Yeah, and that's actually something that doesn't get talked about enough in terms of the training piece. When your users are using the free ChatGPT options, which they probably are, the free model automatically trains on data. That is the default. Anything that you put into the free versions of ChatGPT end up in their training data and then can come out in a response somewhere else. In the paid versions, it depends on the level. So you kind of have to look at there's a document that they have. And if you're on the free one and you don't want it to train on your data, you got to dig through the settings to find that. But it's not easy to find, and it's meant that way. So these are the things that we see a lot of CIOs and CISOs when they talk to us about, hey, the very first use case, honestly, that most people come to us with is, hey, I know my people are using ChatGPT. Can I give them ChatGPT, but I know what's going on? And that's where our observability and security and compliance pieces come in. So I think that's really just the simplest place to start, is giving people access to the tools they like to use, but making sure that everything's protected.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would also add one last item on compliance there. Sorry. It's about more than just keeping your data secure and making sure it's not going to leak or get used in a training set. It's also about being able to prove to auditors, regulators, anyone else what your people have and have not used AI for. Particularly in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of questions there around whether it's being used in a patient context, which it generally is not allowed to be. Proving that it's not is a whole lot easier if you have a audit log of everything your team has ever used the AI tool for, and you know they haven't ever gotten, at least without significantly working to bypass your controls, haven't gotten to any other AI tooling.
Yep. So we'll take, I think there's one or two more questions left. What are business reasons for and against using AI solutions that are integrated with SaaS platforms? And Tom, we talked about Copilot. Obviously, Salesforce has one. It's like, if you can name a platform, somebody has an AI tool inside of it. Matthew McConaughey's sitting in the rain for Salesforce for it. So this is the sort of thing that we run into a lot of. Well, which one do I use? Which ones are worth it? Which ones aren't? And that's not necessarily the question to be asking there.
The real question to ask here is, what is the level of assurance I have and comfortability that I have with using those inbuilt tools and understanding whether or not they're secure and whether or not their usage is compliant. There are lots of tools on the market that are not our tools, that are not only beneficial to an organization but should be consumed. Zoom call recordings is a very good one, right? It dramatically assists in our day-to-day process. Same with Teams call recordings. I wouldn't want to turn that feature off for any feature. Now you can use Fireflies or other tools where you can plug into a different model on the back and get some of the same attestations. So the real answer comes down to, if the tool is providing, if the flashy AI button in the tool is providing a benefit that is calculable and demonstrable, then use that tool as long as you're comfortable with its level of security. But in almost every case, in reality, the reason why, when polled, 92% of CIOs are implementing AI right now, but 30% of CEOs, only 30% think there's any value today, is because all of those tools are so wide that actually getting benefits from using them in the flow doesn't help your business and what you do directly. So really it comes down to calculate the risk versus the value that you're getting back from that tool. And if you can't calculate the value from that tool, if you can't separate its usage, if you can't understand how it's impacting the business, then it's probably a better solution to take something like ours and build a workflow where you have total insight and direction into every step that's taken, every piece of data that's used, and then you can actually calculate what the return on investment are in those solutions and what the efficacy rate of AI is for each one of those workflows. So I know I should say only use Expedient, but there are great tools that aren't Expedient. Mike?
Yeah, I think it's really about, like you said, does that tool have some unique value that being embedded gives you? There's undeniable reasons that Zoom, using their AI companion is worth doing over trying to incorporate it with some other model. And there's other things that are similar. If your entire life is in Salesforce, it may make sense to use Salesforce AI, as AI tool because it's all already there. The thing is, not a lot of company or businesses have one tool that their people work in all day, every day. And there's a lot of advantage if you can step out of that individual tool and have one place that they can go that's talking to Salesforce, but also knows what their Outlook emails and calendar looks like, and also has information from their SharePoint drives, and it can fuse all of that together and give one better response.
Yeah, and I think the big one is does the platform itself having access to that data, or does the platform itself being able to collect some form of data like a Zoom call recording? There's other tools that you can integrate there, but the Zoom one being built in means I click the record button or I use their AI companion. It's just baked in. I don't have to record the call, then get the transcript, then take the transcript and run it through a different tool. There's a native flow there. I think that's really where that value comes into play, and that's where the differentiation happens. And then in other places where it's like I just need to get the data out and then I want to do something with it, that's where our tool definitely comes in. Speaking of our tool, how is the Expedient AI platform priced? In other words, how can I develop a total cost of ownership model? And just from a base level, our AI platform is based on company size. So instead of saying this many tokens per user or this many individual users, it's based on t-shirt sizing in terms of company size. And Tom, you can feel free to go really explain all of this out in terms of total cost of ownership, because you do this all day.
Yeah. I think the most appropriate answer for this audience is come talk to me. I can find the size that works best for you. We don't charge per head. What we try to do, since you can consider the solution that we provide as almost private cloud itself, right? We build your own infrastructure for you. We manage that infrastructure in order to ensure the security, but that also enables us to provide the chat client, which saves you that cost that you would traditionally have to pay across the board for per head seat licensing. And that comes at a dramatic savings for organizations. So talk to your AE, talk to your local rep, talk to your connect, hop on the phone with us. We can happily show you kind of how the pricing works. And usually when people are not forward with pricing, it's because the pricing is high. We're actually in a position where we're driving anywhere from 50% to 80% savings over a single tool, right? Like Copilot, like ChatGPT, while providing access to all the models. So if that's enough to get you excited, please feel free to hop on a call. I'll detail it all for you.
Yeah, and once we wrap up, there will be a QR code right here on the screen, probably down here at the bottom, that you can scan to set up time with us. We'll bring in Tom to talk through those things. So stick around for a little bit right after we're done, and you'll be able to get to that code. Last question here. And this one was kind of interesting. This one came in live. Given the current power limitations, does the need to support AI workloads outweigh the benefits of maximizing spatial density within a single data center, specifically with things like security cages? Yeah, you're going to find this a lot. In a lot of places, security cages and those functions, trying to limit the physical space because you're trying to stick inside of a specific number of racks, or you're paying for floor space. A lot of data centers, in order to hit the power needs, not necessarily the density or the cooling purposes, will spread that workload out. Because everybody wants these like 50 kW racks when previously it was like 8 to 10. We've heard of 160 kW racks, which is bananas to me. That's 5 kW per rack unit. Meanwhile, a few years, like less than 10 years ago, it was 5 kW per rack. So that's wild. all of this will come into play, especially when you're talking to data center providers, including us, honestly, where spreading out those workloads helps with cooling. It helps with being able to hit the power needs that you have. But at the same time, figuring out ways to secure that. If you need to have a cage, do you really need to have a cage, or can you just lock the rack itself? There's different ways to go about that. And if you have questions about that, we can definitely talk. Mike, Tom, any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
I just kind of added that oddly it makes security cages almost free, because you're going to be using up all that floor space anyway. It's, normally you'd be paying for that square footage, but you're paying for that square footage if you're going to go 3x the data center's typical rack power density anyway. So you're basically paying for some fence.
Yeah, and I think go ahead, Tom.
No, separate this. If you had to comment on that, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the security cage mentality is something that we see a lot with specific regulatory requirements, that sort of thing. Of I have racks and those are secure, but I need to secure my whole physical footprint. And I think there's definitely some value still in there, but it will definitely change the way that you are going about looking at your rack space when you need to have that level of power density, and how does the provider actually give you that space and that power without ruining everything for everybody.
And I think one little piece of information, just to take away from this, we talked about two different sides of AI here. We talked about putting up privacy and compliance around the public model usage because of how advanced they are and how much investment they've made there. It makes a lot of sense at the cost savings to use the public models when they can. But then on the infrastructure side, we're talking about the cost in order to kind of spin up your own private models. And the world between that exists, and that's what we're trying to help people navigate. So on a scale of I'm okay with public models, but make them private, all the way to I need an edge device that's air gapped sitting inside of this location. Everything along that spectrum we're able to service from an AI perspective. So really you can set, at what risk level are you at, and then at what budget level are you willing to commit? And then all of those cases we're able to solve problems. And we probably talk about these too much separately. But this is a good segue in the end to understand that it's the entire spectrum that we're able to help you service.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really great place to end. If you want a 3-month free trial, and you get to talk to Tom a whole lot, go ahead and scan this QR code down here. This is a risk-free trial for 3 months. We bring in the gateway that we've talked about earlier. You get access to the models. We also set up a data connector and some storage, so you can do things like that HR onboarding use case, trying to help you get value out of it quickly. And that's really where this comes in. We see a huge ROI. I mean, Tom mentioned it's ROI positive from day one, but this is where we start to see like the use cases and the light bulbs go off and people go, oh, wait, I could do this too. Or what about this? So go ahead and scan down here on the QR code. We're going to leave that up after we wrap here. Tom, Mikes, thank you so much for the time earlier in the conversations and then coming back for Q&A time. I really appreciate it. You guys are great. And audience, thank you for joining us. Join us next month for something that I have been excited about for the last, 6 months. I've been talking about this for quite some time. We mentioned security cages and racks and power, and we're going to go on a data center tour with our Senior Vice President of Data Center Engineering and Operations, Ed DeZerko. And we're going to talk through what makes up the back end, the base platform, the physical nature of all of the services that we provide and all of the value that we put in. I'm incredibly excited about this. Join us next month. More details coming soon on dates and times, but you're not going to want to miss that one. I promise. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.